Imagine a world where wars ceased, a world where roads connected entire continents, and prosperity flourished for 200 straight years. Sounds like a utopia, doesn't it? Well, this world actually existed. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in an era where peace wasn't just a dream, but a tangible reality that transformed the lives of millions? Picture this. The mighty Roman Empire, built on conquest and warfare, suddenly shifting its focus from the sword to something far more powerful: prosperity itself. Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most fascinating periods, the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For 2 centuries, this empire achieved something unprecedented, an era of stability and growth that would forever change the course of Western civilization. And here's what makes this story truly remarkable. It all started with a civil war. Yes, you heard that right. From the ashes of decades of brutal conflict emerged history's longest period of peace and prosperity. The same empire that conquered through bloodshed would soon build libraries instead of fortresses, construct roads instead of siege weapons, and create a cultural golden age that we still marvel at today. But how did they do it? How did an empire built on warfare transform itself into a beacon of peace? That's the fascinating journey we're about to embark on. You'll discover how one man's vision revolutionized an entire civilization, how a network of roads created the ancient world's first truly global economy, and how ideas and cultures flowed freely across 3 continents. If you're ready to discover how an empire of war became an empire of peace, join me on this epic historical journey. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your history-loving friends, and subscribe to Imperium Chronicles, your gateway to the most incredible stories of antiquity. It all began with a young man named Octavius, who would later become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. But before he was Augustus, before he was even Octavius Augustus, he was simply a 19-year-old heir to his murdered great-uncle Julius Caesar. And what an inheritance it was! A republic torn apart by civil wars, where Roman fought against Roman for decades. But this young man had a revolutionary vision. What if Rome, instead of destroying, began to build? What if the greatest military power in the world turned its energy toward creation rather than conquest? It sounds almost naive, doesn't it? But Octavius would prove to be anything but naive. By 27 before Christ, when he finally secured his power and took the name Augustus, Rome was exhausted. Imagine a world where brothers had fought brothers, where farms lay abandoned, where trade routes were unsafe, and where the mighty Roman economy lay in shambles. The people weren't dreaming of glory anymore. They were desperately hoping for stability. And here's where Augustus proved his genius. He understood something that few leaders in history ever grasp. True power doesn't come from the sword, but from the ability to create prosperity. While others might have sought revenge or more conquests, Augustus chose a different path. His strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of aggressively expanding borders like his predecessors, he consolidated what Rome already had. He established defendable frontiers, transformed the army from a collection of citizen soldiers into a professional force, and most importantly, created an efficient administration that made the empire run like a well-oiled machine. Here's a fascinating detail that many don't know. Augustus literally closed the doors of the Temple of Janus, an ancient Roman ritual that symbolized peace throughout the empire. These doors had stood open for centuries during times of war, which was almost constant in Roman history. But under Augustus's reign, they were closed not once, not twice, but 3 times. To put this in perspective, before Augustus, these doors had only been closed twice in nearly 700 years of Roman history. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Augustus was how he achieved all this. He didn't call himself king or dictator. Instead, he carefully crafted his image as the first citizen, the protector of Roman traditions, all while completely transforming how Rome was governed. He would often say, "I found Rome in clay and left it in marble." And he meant this quite literally, launching a massive building program that transformed the capital from a city of brick into one of marble. And so began the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. A dream born not in the heat of battle, but in the mind of a young man who dared to imagine a different kind of empire. An empire where the sound of construction would replace the clash of swords, where merchants would travel freely from Britain to Egypt, and where Roman citizens could finally dream of a future without war. If Augustus planted the seeds of peace, his successors nurtured them with something extraordinary, infrastructure on a scale the world had never seen before. The emperors of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, followed by the Flavians, understood a fundamental truth. Lasting peace needed solid foundations, quite literally. Let me paint you a picture of what Rome achieved. Imagine the largest road network the ancient world had ever seen. 400,000 kilometers of engineered roads stretching from the misty shores of Britain to the sun-baked sands of Egypt. But these weren't just simple paths. They were the superhighways of their time. Here's something fascinating. These roads were built so well that many of them lasted for over 1,000 years, and some still form the foundation of modern highways today. They were built in layers, with deep foundations and careful drainage systems. The Romans even installed mile markers and built rest stops every 20 to 30 miles, complete with inns, stables, and workshops. It was like an ancient version of our modern highway system. But roads were just the beginning. The Romans transformed their cities with massive aqueducts that brought fresh, clean water from mountains dozens of miles away. Picture Rome itself, a city that grew to have more than 1 million inhabitants. That's absolutely mind-boggling for ancient times. To put this in perspective, London wouldn't reach that size until the 19th century, almost 2,000 years later. The peace and prosperity made possible some of the most remarkable buildings in human history. The Colosseum, which could seat 50,000 spectators. Imagine a modern sports stadium, but built 2,000 years ago. The Baths of Caracalla, where 16,000 people could bathe daily in heated pools and steam rooms. And the Pantheon, with its remarkable concrete dome that still stands today as a testament to Roman engineering genius. The economy flourished in ways previously unimaginable. Merchants could travel from London to Alexandria without fear of bandits or wars, protected by Roman law and Roman roads. A single currency, the denarius, made trade simple across this vast empire. Think of it as an ancient euro accepted everywhere from Spain to Syria. And the trade. Exotic spices from India appeared on Roman dinner tables, while Chinese silk clothed the wealthy. Roman wine and olive oil were enjoyed in taverns as far north as Germania. Archaeological discoveries have found Roman coins in India, Chinese pottery in Britain, and African ivory in Gaul. We even have records of Roman traders reaching as far as Vietnam. Here's a delightful detail. In Rome, you could buy pepper from India, drink wine from France, eat olives from Spain, wear silk from China, and use perfume from Arabia, all in a single day's shopping. It was like having the ancient world's biggest shopping mall right at your doorstep. The Pax Romana didn't just bring peace. It created the ancient world's first truly global economy. A merchant could travel 3,000 miles from one end of the empire to the other, speaking Latin or Greek, paying with the same coins, protected by the same laws, and staying in standardized inns along Roman roads. It was globalization, Roman style. If the Pax Romana was Rome's greatest achievement, then its pinnacle came during the reign of 5 remarkable men known as the 5 Good Emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. These extraordinary rulers governed Rome from 96 to 180 after Christ, transforming the empire into the greatest civilization of the ancient world. Let me tell you about these remarkable men. It all began with Nerva, who started a revolutionary tradition. Instead of passing power to his biological son, he adopted the most capable person he could find as his heir. And who did he choose? Trajan, a brilliant military commander from Spain. Yes, you heard that right. One of Rome's greatest emperors wasn't even from Italy. Trajan was something special. Under his rule, the empire reached its greatest extent, stretching from the foggy shores of Britain to the burning sands of Arabia. But here's what made him truly remarkable. He didn't just conquer territories, he made them profitable. When he conquered Dacia, modern-day Romania, He gained access to vast gold mines that funded public works across the empire. The forum he built in Rome was so magnificent that even 6 centuries later, people would stop and stare in amazement. Then came Hadrian, and if Trajan was the empire's sword, Hadrian was its architect. He spent most of his reign traveling throughout the empire. Imagine a modern president spending 13 years visiting every state and territory. He built his famous wall in Britain, stretching 73 miles from sea to sea. But did you know he also built massive temples in Athens, rebuilt the Pantheon in Rome, and created a magnificent villa near Tivoli that was practically a city in itself? Antoninus Pius might be the most fascinating of all. He ruled for 23 years without ever leaving Rome. Imagine that. An emperor who didn't need to fight wars or travel because the empire ran so smoothly it practically governed itself. Under his reign, Rome experienced such peace and prosperity that historians would later call his time the peak of human happiness. And finally, we come to Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor. Picture this: the most powerful man in the world, spending his nights writing philosophical reflections by candlelight in his military tent while defending the empire's borders. His book, Meditations, wasn't even meant to be published. It was his personal diary. Yet today, 2,000 years later, people still read his words for guidance and wisdom. Here's a fascinating detail about Marcus Aurelius. Despite being emperor, he would regularly attend philosophy lectures in Rome, sitting among ordinary students. When someone questioned whether this was appropriate for an emperor, he reportedly said, "It is more fitting for an emperor to go to his teachers than to have teachers come to him." These 5 men ruled the Roman Empire at its absolute peak. During their reigns, a person could travel from Britain to Egypt without fear. Trade flourished from India to Spain, and Roman cities boasted amenities that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. They proved that good leadership isn't about glory or conquest. It's about creating prosperity and peace for ordinary people. The era of the 5 good emperors shows us something remarkable, that even in ancient times it was possible to create a world where wisdom and power worked hand in hand, where peace and prosperity weren't just dreams, but daily realities. Their achievement was so extraordinary that nearly 2,000 years later, we're still studying their examples and learning from their wisdom. But what was it really like to live during the Pax Romana? Imagine waking up in the most prosperous, connected, and culturally rich period the world had ever known. For many people living during this remarkable time, it was quite literally the best era in human history up to that point. Let me paint you a picture of this fascinating world. Cities weren't just places to live. They were vibrant centers of culture, commerce, and innovation. In Rome itself, you could start your day at the public baths, discussing philosophy with strangers from across the empire, then catch a theater performance in the afternoon, and end your evening watching spectacular games in an arena that could seat 50,000 people. Here's something remarkable. A Roman citizen could be born in Spain, study philosophy in Athens, run a business in Alexandria, and retire in Gaul, all while speaking the same languages, using the same currency, and being protected by the same laws. It was like having an ancient version of the European Union, but even more integrated. Speaking of laws, Roman law during this period was revolutionary. The legal principles they developed were so sophisticated that they still influence modern legal systems today. Did you know that concepts we take for granted, like the presumption of innocence or the idea that both sides in a dispute should be heard, came from Roman law during this period? Literature and the arts reached unprecedented heights. Imagine sitting in a recitation hall, listening to Tacitus unveil his histories, or enjoying Juvenal's biting satires of Roman society. Suetonius wrote such detailed biographies of the emperors that we still use them as primary sources today. These weren't just writers. They were master storytellers who painted vivid pictures of their world that have survived for 2,000 years. The architecture of this period was simply mind-blowing. The Romans didn't just build big, they built smart. The Pantheon, with its perfect dome, still stands today as a testament to their engineering genius. Modern architects still study how they achieved such perfection without modern technology. And those famous Roman theaters? They had such perfect acoustics that you could hear a whisper from the stage even in the back rows. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of life during the Pax Romana was the incredible cultural mixing. Imagine walking through the streets of Roman York and finding people worshipping Egyptian gods like Isis and Serapis. Picture Germanic soldiers stationed in Syria adopting local customs, while Greek intellectuals taught young Roman aristocrats in the heart of Rome. Here's a delightful detail. Archaeologists have found evidence of this cultural fusion everywhere. In Britain, they've discovered temples to Middle Eastern gods, African-style jewelry, and Mediterranean cooking pots. In a Roman military camp in Scotland, they found a birthday party invitation written in Latin on a wooden tablet. Talk about bringing Roman culture to the far corners of the empire. This wasn't just ancient globalization, it was a genuine multicultural society. People weren't just trading goods, they were sharing ideas, beliefs, and ways of life. A Syrian merchant might wear Roman clothes while worshipping Persian gods and enjoying Greek theater. It was a level of cultural integration that wouldn't be seen again for nearly 2,000 years. The Pax Romana created something unprecedented, a world where peace and prosperity allowed people to focus on arts, culture, and the pursuit of knowledge. It wasn't perfect, but it was revolutionary. A glimpse of what humanity could achieve when swords were set aside in favor of statues, when walls were built to support aqueducts rather than keep people out. While we often paint a picture of the Pax Romana as a golden age of peace and prosperity, beneath this shining surface lay darker realities that many history books gloss over. Let me take you behind the scenes of this remarkable era to explore its hidden costs and challenges. Picture this: an enormous standing army of 400,000 professional soldiers stationed across the empire's vast frontiers. This wasn't just for show. Maintaining this force was like running a small nation within the empire. Each soldier needed food, equipment, housing, and regular pay. The cost? Astronomical. But here's where it gets interesting. Who paid for all this? The answer might surprise you. The burden fell heavily on the provinces, especially those in the east. These regions were essentially forced to bankroll the Roman way of life through increasingly heavy taxation. Imagine being a merchant in Syria or a farmer in Egypt, watching a significant portion of your hard-earned wealth being carted off to Rome year after year. The provinces weren't just contributing to the empire, they were being systematically drained to maintain it. But perhaps the darkest shadow lurking beneath the surface of Roman prosperity was slavery. Let this sink in. 1 in every 3 people living in the empire was a slave. We're talking about millions of human beings, working in conditions that would horrify us today. From the mines of Spain to the grand villas of Rome, from the wheat fields of Egypt to the households of the wealthy, the entire Roman economy was built on the backs of enslaved people. This was industrialized slavery on a scale that hadn't been seen before and wouldn't be seen again until the Atlantic slave trade centuries later. And here's something that often gets overlooked. These slaves weren't just manual laborers. Many were highly skilled professionals: doctors, teachers, accountants, and architects. The Roman elite literally owned the minds that helped build their civilization. It's a sobering thought. Behind every magnificent Roman achievement, there was likely an enslaved person who never got credit for their contribution. But the challenges didn't stop there. Imagine being a Roman commander stationed along the Rhine or Danube frontier. Every day, you'd be watching the horizon, knowing that beyond those rivers lay countless Germanic tribes, nomadic peoples from Central Asia, and rival kingdoms in the east, all eyeing Roman territory with interest. The pressure was constant, like a pot always on the verge of boiling over. Think about it. Maintaining peace required eternal vigilance. Every watchtower had to be manned, every border patrol had to be run, every diplomatic mission had to be funded, and as time went on, these costs only grew larger. The famous Roman roads we admire today weren't just for trade, they were military highways, built and maintained at enormous expense to allow rapid response to any threat. This brings us to a fascinating paradox. The Pax Romana, this great peace, was actually maintained through the constant threat of overwhelming military force. It was peace through strength, but strength came at a tremendous cost, both financial and human. So next time you hear about the glories of the Pax Romana, remember this: peace and prosperity for some came at a terrible price for others. It's a reminder that history is rarely as simple as it first appears, and that behind every golden age lie shadows worth examining. History loves its ironies, and here's one of its greatest. The cracks in Rome's golden age began to appear during the reign of its wisest emperor, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who wrote profound meditations by candlelight in his military tent, found himself facing challenges that would have tested even the gods themselves. Picture this. The year is 165 after Christ. Marcus Aurelius, who would rather be discussing philosophy in Rome's gardens, instead spends his days on the frozen banks of the Danube River. The Germanic tribes, particularly the Marcomanni, have launched one of the most serious invasions Rome had seen in generations. These weren't just raids. This was an existential threat to the empire. What made these Marcomannic wars so different? Well, for the first time in nearly 2 centuries, barbarian tribes actually managed to break through Rome's frontiers and reach Italy itself. Imagine the shock and terror when these warriors appeared before the wealthy city of Aquileia, the first time hostile forces had been seen in Italy since Hannibal's elephants 3 centuries earlier. But the gods, it seemed, had an even crueler test in store. As if war wasn't enough, a devastating plague swept through the empire. Modern historians believe it was smallpox, brought back by Roman troops from campaigns in the east. This wasn't just any disease. This was a killer that would change the course of history. From 165 to 180 after Christ, this invisible enemy claimed millions of lives. Entire towns were abandoned, trade routes fell silent, and the mighty Roman economy began to stumble. Here's a fascinating detail most people don't know. The plague was so severe that in some regions it killed up to 1/3 of the population. Roman armies, packed tightly in military camps, were hit particularly hard. Imagine trying to defend an empire when your soldiers are dying not from enemy weapons, but from an invisible foe no sword could fight. The death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 after Christ wasn't just the passing of an emperor, it was the symbolic end of an era. Think about the cruel joke fate played here. The most philosophically minded emperor, who wrote about accepting destiny's plans with grace, had to watch helplessly as the peace he tried so hard to preserve began to crumble. But the final blow to the Pax Romana came in the form of Marcus's son, Commodus. Now here's where things get really interesting. Unlike the 5 good emperors before him, who were all chosen based on merit, Commodus inherited the throne simply by birth. And what a disaster that turned out to be. While his father spent nights writing philosophical treatises, Commodus spent his time pretending to be Hercules and fighting in the gladiatorial arena. Yes, you heard that right. The emperor himself would fight as a gladiator, charging the city an enormous fee for each appearance. Imagine the shock of Romans watching their emperor, who was supposed to be governing the largest empire on earth, instead strutting around the Colosseum, fighting disabled people and pretended enemies. This wasn't just embarrassing. It was the death knell of an era that had seen Rome reach heights never achieved before. Yet what an era it had been. 2 centuries of relative peace and prosperity, something no civilization had managed before and few have achieved since. To put this in perspective, this period of peace lasted longer than the entire history of the United States as an independent nation. It was a golden age that would be remembered and longed for by generations to come. The end of the Pax Romana teaches us a powerful lesson. Even the greatest achievements of civilization are fragile, and it takes more than wisdom alone to preserve them. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, the tides of history simply cannot be held back. As we reach the end of our journey through this remarkable chapter of human history, let's pause and reflect on what the Pax Romana can teach us today. You see, this isn't just a story about ancient Rome. It's a mirror that reflects our own hopes, challenges, and possibilities. Think about this. When we measure the greatness of civilizations, we often focus on their conquests, their monuments, their wars. But the Pax Romana teaches us something profound. True greatness lies in the ability to create and maintain lasting prosperity. It's not about how many battles you win, but about how long you can avoid having to fight them in the first place. Look around at our world today. We face climate change, economic uncertainties, political tensions between global powers. Sound familiar? Rome faced its own versions of these challenges. Environmental disasters, financial crises, and constant pressure from neighboring powers. Yet for 2 centuries, they managed to maintain a peace that allowed culture, commerce, and human achievement to flourish. Here's something fascinating to consider. The Pax Romana lasted 200 years. That's longer than the United States has existed, longer than the time since Napoleon, longer than the entire Industrial Revolution. Just let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't just a golden age. It was a marathon of peace and prosperity that has rarely been matched in human history. And its echoes still resonate today. Every time you drive on a straight road, you're experiencing a Roman legacy. When you enter a domed building, you're seeing Roman engineering at work. Our legal systems, our languages, even our concepts of citizenship and civil society, all bear the fingerprints of the Pax Romana. But perhaps the most valuable lesson Rome teaches us is about the nature of peace itself. Peace isn't just the silence of weapons or the absence of conflict. True peace is active. It's the presence of justice, the flourishing of culture, the prosperity of commerce, and the hope for a better tomorrow. The Romans understood that peace must be built and maintained day by day through wise governance, strong institutions, and the constant effort to create a society worth preserving. Yet they also teach us humility. Even the mightiest empire, even the longest peace, eventually comes to an end. Nothing lasts forever, but that doesn't make our efforts to build something worthwhile any less valuable. In fact, it makes them more precious. As we close this chapter of our historical journey, I want to thank you for exploring the Pax Romana with me. If this glimpse into one of humanity's most remarkable achievements has sparked your curiosity, you're in the right place. Here at Imperium Chronicles, we're dedicated to bringing history's greatest stories to life. What other golden ages of human history would you like to explore? The Renaissance, the Islamic Golden Age, the Tang Dynasty? The possibilities are endless, and history's treasures are waiting to be discovered. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on our next historical adventure. Remember, history isn't just about understanding the past. It's about illuminating the path to our future. By studying the triumphs and challenges of those who came before us, we can better navigate our own journey forward. Let me leave you with this thought. If the Romans could maintain peace and prosperity for 2 centuries with the limited resources and technology of their time, imagine what we might achieve today with all our modern advantages. The question is, do we have the wisdom and dedication to build our own golden age? Like this video if you've enjoyed our journey through the Pax Romana, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and join us at Imperium Chronicles for more fascinating stories from the past that shine light on our present and future. What great era of history should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below.